The world was frozen. Not everywhere, not all the time, but for long stretches, ice was the dominant force. The glaciers miles thick crawled across continents. Sea levels dropped, exposing new land. The wind was relentless, and the cold was a killer. This was the Pleistocene, the Great Ice Age. It lasted for more than 2.5 million years, a vast and brutal stage for a fragile, new kind of animal to find its footing. How did they do it? How did our ancestors, with no natural armor, no claws, no fangs to speak of, survive in a world of woolly mammoths, saber-toothed cats, and crushing cold? It wasn't one single trick, there was no magic bullet, it was a combination of things. It was about the body, the mind, the tools they made, and most of all, the way they lived together. It's a story of incredible toughness and even more incredible adaptability. Let's get one thing straight. The Ice Age wasn't one long, unbroken winter. It was a series of glacial periods, the deep freezes and interglacial periods, which were warmer, sometimes even warmer than today. The real challenge wasn't just the cold, it was the constant change. An environment that was a lush forest one millennium could be a frozen steppe the next. You couldn't just learn one way of life and stick with it. You had to be flexible. You had to be ready to move, to change your diet, to invent new ways of doing things. The ones who couldn't adapt died. It's as simple and as harsh as that. Our story starts with the body itself. Evolution is a slow, patient tinkerer. Over hundreds of thousands of years, it shaped our ancestors for the world they found themselves in. Take the Neanderthals, our close cousins who thrived in Ice Age Europe and Asia for a very long time. Look at their skeletons. They were stocky, powerfully built, with short limbs and a barrel chest. This body shape is a classic adaptation to the cold. It conserves heat. A sphere loses heat more slowly than a long, thin stick. A compact body holds onto its warmth better than a lanky one. Their noses were also large and wide, perhaps to warm and humidify the frigid, dry air before it hit their lungs. They were biologically built for the cold. Early modern humans, Homo sapiens, who came out of Africa, were different. They were taller, leaner, with longer limbs. This body plan is better for warmer climates as it helps dissipate heat. It's also much more efficient for walking and running long distances, so when they first moved into the colder parts of the world, they were at a physical disadvantage compared to the Neanderthals. They weren't naturally built for it, they had to make up for it in other ways. But that long-distance running ability was a huge asset. It meant they could cover more ground, track migratory herds, and escape danger. It gave them a different kind of advantage. The biggest physical adaptation, though, was inside the skull. The human brain is ridiculously expensive. It takes up a huge amount of our daily calories. For evolution to select for such a costly organ, the payoff had to be immense. And it was. That big brain was a supercomputer for survival. It could remember the location of a hidden water source from years ago. It could analyze the tracks of an animal and predict where it was going. It could imagine a new tool and then figure out the steps needed to create it. It was the ultimate problem-solving machine. It allowed us to think our way out of problems that we couldn't fight our way out of. But a brain is useless without the tools to turn thoughts into action, and this is where technology comes in. When we think of Ice Age technology, we usually think of a caveman with a club. The reality was so much more sophisticated. The first and most important piece of technology wasn't made of stone. It was fire. The control of fire changed everything. It's hard to overstate its importance. Fire provides warmth. It turns a freezing cave into a home. It keeps the killing cold at bay through the long, dark nights of a glacial winter. That alone is a massive advantage, but it does so much more. Fire provides light. It pushes back the darkness, extending the usable day. Now you could work on your tools after sunset. You could repair your clothing. You could see the faces of your family. It created a focal point for the group, a social center. The hearth became the heart of the community. Fire protects. Most predators are rightly afraid of it. A ring of fire around your camp is a powerful shield against a cave bear or a lion looking for an easy meal. It gave our ancestors a measure of safety in a world full of things that wanted to eat them. And, maybe most importantly, fire cooks food. Cooking does several amazing things. It kills parasites and bacteria, making food safer to eat. It also breaks down tough fibers and proteins, making food easier to digest. This means your body can extract more calories and nutrients from the same amount of food. Some scientists think that cooking was a key step in our evolution. By pre-digesting our food with fire, we freed up metabolic energy that could then be diverted to fueling our ever-growing brains. We essentially outsourced part of our digestion to the campfire. After fire, you have the stone tools. For most of human history, our technology was made of stone, bone, and wood. Early on, the tools were simple. A rock smashed against another rock to create a sharp edge. A hand axe, a chopper, useful for smashing bones to get at the marrow or for rough butchery. But over time, the techniques became incredibly refined. Neanderthals developed a method called the Levallois technique. It was like a form of 3D printing with stone. You would carefully prepare a core of flint, shaping it precisely. Then, with one final skillful strike, you could knock off a finished tool, a spear point, a scraper, a knife that was the perfect shape and size. It required planning, foresight, and a deep understanding of the material. It wasn't just brute force. It was artistry. When modern humans arrived on the scene, they brought with them new toolkits. They started making long, thin blades from stone cores. This was a very efficient way to use raw material. From one core, you could get many blades, which could then be turned into all sorts of specialized tools. Knives, spear points, arrowheads, engravers, and drills. It was like having a Swiss Army knife toolkit. You had the right tool for every job. And one of those jobs was making clothes. This is one of the most underrated technologies of the Ice Age. You can't survive a blizzard by just wrapping yourself in a raw animal hide. It's stiff, heavy, and doesn't insulate well. To stay warm, you need tailored clothing. You need multiple layers. You need to be able to trap air between the layers to create insulation. To do this, you need to be able to cut hides precisely and sew them together. The invention that made this possible was the bone needle. Archaeologists have found tiny, delicate needles carved from bone or ivory that date back tens of thousands of years. They have a tiny, drilled eye, just like a modern needle. With these, our ancestors could use sinew as thread to stitch together complex, multi-layered garments. They could make fitted trousers, parkas with hoods, mittens, and insulated boots. We don't have any of these clothes left, of course. They rotted away long ago. But we see the evidence in the tools they left behind and in the art they created. These figurines from the period show people wearing what look like detailed hooded parkas. They weren't just surviving the cold, they were mastering it with technology. Another key piece of hunting technology was the spear thrower, also known as an atlatl. A simple spear is a dangerous weapon, but you have to get close to your prey. A big, angry animal like a steppe bison or a woolly rhino is not something you want to get close to. The atlatl is a game changer. It's basically a stick with a hook on the end that cradles the back of the spear. By using it, you can throw the spear with much more force and speed, like an extension of your arm. It acts as a lever, multiplying the power of the throw. Suddenly, you could hunt dangerous game from a safer distance. It was a simple piece of wood or bone, but it was a revolution in hunting, so they had the bodies and they had the tools. But that's still not enough. An individual, no matter how smart or well-equipped, wouldn't last long out there. The real secret to survival was the group. We are social animals to our core. Our ancestors lived in small, mobile family groups, and their social structure was their primary survival strategy. Cooperation was everything. Think about hunting a mammoth. A mammoth is a 12-ton mountain of meat, fat, and fury. You don't take that down by yourself. It required a team of hunters working together with a plan. Some might have been responsible for driving the animal towards a trap, like a cliff or a bog. Others would be waiting with spears. They had to communicate, to coordinate, to trust each other. A successful hunt meant food for everyone for weeks. A failed hunt could mean starvation. And after the hunt, the most important rule was sharing. The food was brought back to the camp and divided up. The hunters who made the kill didn't hoard it for themselves. They shared with the children, the elderly, and those who stayed behind to tend the fire or look after the camp. This was their social safety net. Maybe your hunt failed this week, but your neighbor's was successful. He shares with you. Next week, the roles might be reversed. Sharing ensures that the group as a whole survives, even when individuals have bad luck. It's a system of mutual support. This social bond went deeper than just sharing food. We have fossil evidence of this compassion. In a cave in Iraq called Shanidar, archaeologists found the remains of a Neanderthal man who had suffered a series of devastating injuries. He had a crushing blow to his head that probably blinded him in one eye. His right arm was withered and had been amputated above the elbow. He was lame and would have walked with a painful limp, yet he didn't die from these injuries. And he lived for years afterward. He couldn't have hunted. He probably couldn't have even gathered much food for himself. For him to have survived, someone must have been taking care of him. They were feeding him, protecting him, and helping him. This wasn't just about practical survival, this was about empathy. It shows us that they had a deep sense of community and responsibility for one another. This social life was powered by language. We don't know exactly when complex language evolved, but by the time of the late Ice Age, it was almost certainly in place. Language allows you to share complex information. It's not just, look, a deer. It's, I saw deer tracks by the river this morning. They were fresh. They belonged to a young male, and he was heading towards the 3 birch trees on the ridge. Let's gather a hunting party and try to ambush him there this afternoon. That level of detail is impossible without language. Language is also how you pass down knowledge. An elder could teach a child which plants are good to eat and which are poisonous. They could demonstrate the precise angle to strike a piece of flint to make a perfect blade. All the accumulated wisdom of the group could be passed from one generation to the next. And culture is a form of inheritance, just like genes, but it can change and adapt much, much faster. If someone invented a better way to tie a spear point to a shaft, that information could spread through the group in a day. A genetic adaptation might take thousands of years. This ability to learn from each other was our superpower. And the groups weren't isolated, they were part of larger social networks. We know this because we find materials far from their original source. A type of flint from a specific quarry might be found hundreds of miles away. Seashells used for beads are found in sites deep inland. This means that different groups were meeting, trading, and exchanging not just goods, but also ideas and probably partners. This created a wider community, a web of connections that acted as another layer of security. If your local area was hit by a drought or the animal herds moved away, you could call on your allies in the next valley for help. So, what were they eating to fuel this life? The popular image is of hunters chasing mammoths across the ice. And they definitely did that. The megafauna, the giant animals of the Ice Age, were a huge resource. A single woolly mammoth could feed a group for a long time. Its meat provided protein and fat. Its hide provided material for clothing and shelter. Its bones and tusks could be used to make tools, weapons, and even the framework for huts. In some parts of Eastern Europe, archaeologists have found incredible structures built from carefully arranged mammoth bones. These were not temporary camps, they were semi-permanent homes. Hunting these giants was dangerous but rewarding. They also hunted woolly rhinos, giant elk with massive antlers, steppe bison, and wild horses. But they weren't just big game specialists, that would have been too risky. They were supreme opportunists, they ate whatever they could get, they hunted smaller animals like reindeer, rabbits, and birds. They fished in the rivers and lakes, which were full of life during the warmer months. In coastal areas, they ate seals, shellfish, and seabirds, and they didn't just eat meat. The plants were a crucial part of their diet. They would have gathered edible roots, tubers, berries, nuts, and greens. This is harder to see in the archaeological record because plants decompose easily. But new scientific techniques are revealing this hidden part of their world. By analyzing the dental plaque on ancient teeth, scientists can find microscopic traces of the food they ate. And they're finding starch granules from all sorts of plants. This shows that their diet was much more balanced than we used to think. It was a mix of whatever the local environment had to offer. They had an encyclopedic knowledge of their surroundings. They were master ecologists, but there was something else going on, something beyond just the practical business of staying alive. Our ancestors had a rich inner world. They had art, they had music, they had beliefs. We see it in the caves. In places like Lascaux in France and Altamira in Spain, they went deep into the dark, underground world and covered the walls with breathtaking paintings. They painted the animals that dominated their lives: horses, bison, mammoths, and lions. Why did they do this? We will probably never know for sure. These weren't just decorations for their living rooms. They were in deep, inaccessible parts of the caves. It took effort to get there, and they had to bring light with them, probably animal fat lamps. Maybe it was a form of hunting magic, an attempt to capture the spirit of the animal to ensure a successful hunt. Maybe it was part of a shamanic ritual, a way of connecting with the spirit world. Maybe it was a way of telling stories, of recording the history of the clan. Whatever the reason, it shows us that they were capable of abstract, symbolic thought. They weren't just thinking about their next meal, they were thinking about their place in the universe. They were trying to make sense of the world. We also see the symbolic world in the small things they left behind. They carved intricate figurines from ivory and bone, like the famous Venus of Willendorf. They made jewelry, they drilled holes in shells, animal teeth, and stones to string them together into necklaces and bracelets. They used ochre, a natural mineral pigment, to paint their bodies and their tools. This isn't just about looking good, it's about communication. A certain type of necklace might have signaled that you belong to a particular group. A decorated spear thrower might have been a sign of your status as a great hunter. This is the beginning of what we call culture. It's a shared system of symbols and meanings. It's what binds a group together and gives them a common identity. It's another layer of social glue. So, when you put it all together, a picture emerges. The story of Ice Age survival is the story of how all these different pieces came together. And it was the biological adaptations of the body molded by millennia of natural selection. Technological genius of the mind, able to turn a rock into a life-saving tool and an animal hide into a warm coat. It was the social cohesion of the group, built on cooperation, sharing, and compassion. And it was the cultural and symbolic thought that gave their lives meaning and bound them together. It was a brutal, unforgiving world. Life was hard, and it was often short. But our ancestors were not just passively enduring it. They were active agents in their own survival. They were clever, resilient, and incredibly adaptable. They faced the challenges of a changing world by inventing new technologies, by forming stronger social bonds, and by using their amazing brains to solve problems. The Neanderthals, for all their success, eventually disappeared. We don't know exactly why. Maybe the climate changed too quickly for them to adapt. Maybe they were outcompeted by the newly arrived modern humans whose social networks were larger and whose technology was perhaps more flexible. Maybe it was a combination of many factors, but Homo sapiens survived. We made it through the last great glacial maximum, a period of intense cold, and emerged into the warmer world that followed. The legacy of that survival is written into our DNA and into our very nature. The ability to cooperate, to innovate, to communicate, to plan for the future, and to care for one another. And these are the traits that got our ancestors through the Ice Age. And they are the same traits that have allowed us to build the world we live in today. So we are all the descendants of those tough, brilliant survivors. We carry the fire they first learned to tame.